Welcome back, my friends, to the Derate the Hate podcast. I am your host, Wilk Wilkinson, your blue-collar sage, calming outrage and helping to navigate a world divided by fog and those who would spread that fear, outrage, and grievance. Each week, I'm sharing stories from my path and using the power of conversation and collaboration with my many great guests. Together, we chart a course toward understanding, bridging divides, and fostering a community where wisdom prevails over discord. Friends, it really is about bettering the world one attitude at a time. We did not create the hate, but together we can derate the hate. The only good thing about a bad attitude is we have the ability as individuals to change it. For me, it starts with gratitude and personal accountability. I am so incredibly grateful that you have taken the time to join me for another powerful DTH episode. Please remember to subscribe and share the DTH podcast with your network of friends. If you would like to support the show, check out the Support Us page on the Derate the Hate website. With that, my friends, let's get to it. In this conversation, I have invited my friend Eva Kurilova back to discuss the impact of identity politics on our personal lives and the importance of individuality. She highlights the challenges within the same-sex attracted community and the pressure to conform to certain ideologies. Eva emphasizes the need to recognize and respect individual voices rather than categorizing people solely based on their identity labels. We also discuss the upcoming reality-based Women Unite conference, where Eva will be speaking about how gender ideology harms children. Eva explores the shift in morality based on the concept of oppression and the importance of open conversation and free speech in society. This conversation explores the impact of shutting down conversations and the importance of engaging with opposing views. It highlights the inability to course correct when conversations are stifled. As so many of the DTH conversations do, the discussion also emphasizes the need to hear all sides and find the common humanity, as well as the importance of offering a different path and avoiding the suppression of alternate voices. Friends, with that, don't miss this incredible conversation with my friend Eva Kurilova. Here we go. Eva Kurilova, welcome back, my friend, to the Derate the Hate podcast. So good to see you again.
Thank you so much for having me back on.
Yeah, I enjoyed our conversation last year so much. Episode 171, I believe it was, of the Derate the Hate podcast. You had joined me. We talked. We had a great discussion back then about one of the articles you had written for your Substack. I think it was, what was it? Something about conservatives and are conservatives the biggest threat to same-sex attracted people, and I knew that was a great conversation, and we've bounced a couple of things off each other since then, but definitely looking forward to having you on again. So thank you, Eva, for joining me again. So how have you been?
I've been pretty great. There's been a lot of exciting stuff happening up here in Canada, so it's been a really interesting few months since then.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that we talked about before, right? Was how fast things are moving in some of these social movements and things like that, and it's pretty wild. So let's just start off. There was one of the things that stood out to me a few weeks ago, Eva, on your X feed, or one of the posts you did on X, said that this identitarianism thing or identity politics ideology is great for politics and great for politicians, but in our personal lives, it's just poison. And and that's the reason that I wanted to talk to you, because it's something I've been talking about so much lately, is how this identity politics, this identity synthesis. I just read the book Identity Trap by Yosha Monk. And it is poison. And I'd love to, just kind of get other people's perspective, and especially, you being, Canada's preeminent lesbian, I think is something that you go by once in a while, right?
Yeah, it's in my bio. Yeah.
And this is obviously in your wheelhouse. This is something you write about quite often, whether it be for the distance or your own Substack or
Yeah.
whatever. But then combined with the fact that you really do take serious care in the whole concept of depolarization, and trying to do what you do in a more civilized and depolarizing way. Let's start there.
Sure, yeah. That's a concept that I think about a lot, is sort of, I think, I'm not sure what post you are referring to, but probably something where I was talking about not making the political personal. That's something that I feel like puts me at odds, honestly, with like both sides of just the political spectrum, of the gender debate, because, obviously I speak out against gender ideology, and that brings me a lot of, hate from the trans side. But at the same time, over the past couple of months, I've gotten into a lot of trouble with my own tribe, the side that also speaks out against it. So that includes a lot of like women, a lot of lesbians, a lot of feminists. And so it really bothers me when people use these identity labels to sort of inform not just their politics, but even like their personal lives. For example, part of the reason I've been getting in a lot of trouble is I may speak out against gender ideology, but I do have a friend who is trans identified, who has gone through transition, who also speaks out against it. But because of that, a lot of the people on my own side have really been going after me the past couple of months, because in the kind of, activism I'm doing, I shouldn't even have a friend like that, apparently, right? But to me, that doesn't make any sense. I can have these political goals to protect women's spaces, to protect kids from transition, to protect women's sports. It doesn't mean that I have to hate everybody who is trans identified, who for one reason or another has gone through transition. A lot of people regret it. And even if they don't, they're still humans that I can speak to, right? I think the bigger divides are usually ideological versus simply their identity category, right? So I feel like I've been put at odds with a lot of women, a lot of lesbians who really, it's so funny because the only people who have ever sort of doubted my lesbian identity are either trans rights activists or radical feminists. Because once you kind of go afoul of either of these groups, they sort of take that away from you. Well, you can't possibly be a real lesbian, right? And you're like a bad woman too. So it's something like, even though I do have this title, Canada's preeminent lesbian, it's kind of like a joke, because I really don't see myself first as my identity, neither as a lesbian or as a woman, any of those things. I think of course it's informed by those factors. Of course, that's part of the reason I'm in this entire debate, because of the way this stuff affects women and gay people. But it isn't everything. And I think it's very, very stifling to put yourself in that box and to limit who you can be friends with or how you live in your personal life.
Right.
Yeah.
No, and this thing, this kind of thing, Eva, just drives me absolutely bonkers, because one of the things I had a conversation a while back with a friend of mine who also happens to be trans, and the thing about that is when I'm talking to him, who and him, his name is Xander Keg, was born a female, so has never had any misgivings about the fact that he was born a female, is and always will be, in some way, shape, or form a female, but now was this feminist lesbian, very masculine a female, and just finally came to the realization that living, his life as a male was going to be easier than trying to live his life as a very masculine female, and so now lives as a man, but still acknowledges the fact that, he was a female, and doesn't really buy into that whole, and I'm not going to speak for him, and whatever, people can go back and listen to that episode. And in fact, he'll be on the podcast again too soon, I'm sure. But we talked about the whole idea that these different groups are not a monolith, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just because that's obviously part of his identity, or the fact that you are a same-sex attracted woman, doesn't, I mean, that's part of your identity, but it's not the whole of your identity. It doesn't make up every bit about the core of your identity. And to do so really does a huge disservice to the individual. This is one of the things that I just recently had all the founders of the Pro Human Foundation on the podcast. Another great organization, started by some of the folks from FAIR, or that
Mm-hmm.
used to be with FAIR. And the reality is this: I mean, we all have our different attributes in our life. We all do different things, and we have different, but just because I'm a straight white male Christian conservative, that
The
doesn't
worst.
make up that no or no one of one thing in that different string of things makes up my core identity, and nor should it. And nor should
Mm-hmm.
anybody look at any one of those one things and automatically assume they know everything about me. Why would it be any different with, somebody, in your boat, Eva? Same sex attracted woman, living in Calgary, Calgary, Alberta, Canada, or whatever the case may be. Because you are in what people have defined as a certain identity group, now you must conform to all thought processes within that group. Now you're supposed to ascribe to everything within this monolithic way of thinking. How fair is that?
Yeah, it's not. No, I really, really never ever want to lose sight of the individual. And that's the main reason I speak out against gender ideology, because I think that it does do that. It lumps people into categories, even just categories of gender based on your likes and interests. Like, that's the biggest categories it lumps them into. And so where I've now run into this problem with kind of my own tribe is that I really don't like, I think that's happening on my side too. I think that's just a human kind of universal that we tend to do that. We become tribal and we flatten like all the other groups, we don't really see the individual. And that's very, very frustrating for me. And I can't help but speak out against that. And that's what gets me into trouble. But, like you said, like as a same-sex attracted woman, I have this constant frustration of feeling like the kind of more radical queer elements in the kind of alphabet community, LGBT. The Canadian acronym is ridiculous. It's 2S, LGBTQQ, whatever. I have this constant problem of feeling like they are speaking for me,
Yeah.
And that's part of the main reason why I tweet and why I write and why I try to put myself out there. And actually this month I was lucky enough to be interviewed by a few different news organizations, because it's not that I'm trying to say, okay, those other people don't exist or don't count or whatever, they do. But, I'm here too. And there are a lot more people like me, and we think differently. We don't buy into this entire ideology, and there even are trans identified people as well like that. Especially the older ones, like, we can get into this, but Alberta just announced a bunch of policies to kind of try and counter gender ideology a little bit. And I have a friend who kind of called around to a lot of different trans people he knew. And a lot of the older ones were like, this is fine. We agree with this. We want to safeguard children. We don't think they should transition. Unfortunately, a lot of the younger ones who have really bought into sort of, I guess we can term it queer theory or just queer ideology, they're, totally against it. They think the government hates them. They think the premier hates them, right? That this entire rhetoric of hate around all of this, just because you don't completely buy into this ideology that you're supposed to buy into as a gay person or trans person or progressive person, right? Yeah, so it's very frustrating.
Yeah, the whole idea that we now live in a, and obviously we live in different countries, but it doesn't matter. But we live in this time now where if we don't buy in 100% to whatever is defined as the ideology we're supposed to be walking within, right? Like whatever the talking points are within the group that somebody has placed us in, if we aren't walking lockstep with that, then all of a sudden we are cast out as somebody, as a hater or whatever, kind of like you're talking about, right? People in your same tribe, if you want to call it a tribe, are now castigating you and attacking you for not walking lockstep with that. I mean, that right there, in my opinion, and it makes so much sense when you talk about that being poison, Eva, because that is poison. With these boxes that people place us in, robs us of our individuality. We become invisible as an individual when all of a sudden, if we are not allowed to speak our minds freely, fully, without fear, and actually talk through things. This is one thing that bugs me so much about, what happened with the, the pandemic response. Totally different. I mean, I'm going off on a different angle here, but this is one of the things. I don't care whether it's medicine. I don't care whether it's the law. I don't care whether it's social policy, or things that are happening within our school or whatever. When we are put in these boxes and not allowed to speak up with a counter narrative, speak our mind in a way, we are not able as a human race to counter or course correct for the things that are going wrong, and just the idea that, okay, well, this is what we're doing now. This is another thing I just had a conversation with another friend the other day, is, these morality shifts based on these false narratives, or morality shifts based on the way that the social winds are blowing, right? If we are not able to course correct when we see that things are going terribly wrong, and the only way we can course correct is having the conversation, being able to speak up when we see stuff that, we're like, no, this is not right. This is not going the way that we want this to go. Maybe we need to rethink this whole thing. It's something you and I talked about before, but especially the thing with kids, and that's something that you and I have talked about. I've talked about it with a number of other people. Certain things when it comes to kids. I mean, they only get one chance at their innocence. They only get one go round as a vulnerable, young, impressionable mind, and if we do not try to safeguard that from some of these social winds that are blowing, and say, hey, maybe we need to wait a minute. Maybe it is right. Maybe it is wrong. But let's get past that young and impressionable stage before we, start throwing all this crazy whatever at these young minds. So talk a little bit about that, because I know you've got something coming up. This may or may not air before this conference, this Reality-Based Women Unite conference in March. But I know that's one of the big things that you're talking about there, Eva. So let's go right to that now.
Sure, yeah. So on March 8th, I'm going to be in Toronto for this Reality-Based Women Unite event. A lot of my really good friends are putting this on and are also speakers at the event, and I'm one of the speakers. So it's just, Canadian women who are pushing back against gender ideology have needed an event like this for a long time, because obviously the country's huge. There are a lot of us, but we have a very hard time just getting together and really doing anything. It's incredibly difficult. So March 8th, we're meeting up, and we're each going to have a speech covering different topics that we're most interested in and research and work on. And my topic is the topic of how gender ideology harms children. Because that's just something that, since I've been writing about this issue, that's where I started, and that's what, the thread I keep following. And actually, it's pretty cool because, I started my speech back in January, but I basically had to totally rewrite it, because then come February, and my provincial premier, Danielle Smith, announced a whole slew of policy changes. And among them are policies to try and safeguard children from medical transition, to prohibit puberty blockers and hormones before a certain age, to prohibit surgeries before 18. So that's been just amazing to see. So I was able to write about that. And I also was one of the people she consulted with, one of the many people. There was a lot that she talked to, but I was able to meet her back in November. which was just incredible because I was already a huge fan prior to all of this. I really, really, I really like her. So that was just a dream come true. So that's what I'll be speaking about. And honestly, I'm not sure of the details, but I do hope that will become available later on. And I'm sure it will, so that I can share my talk. It's going to be just a little 10-minute talk, covering all the changes that have happened, which, just have been amazing to see. But, you touched a bit on morality there and how everything seems to be, the social winds are always changing and all this kind of, and that's something that I've also been thinking about lately, just kind of thinking about this topic of like, why are people allowing this to happen to children? Like of all things, why did we go there? And I've been thinking a lot about how we seem to have this kind of, it goes just beyond gender ideology. It's in critical race theory. It's in, all this stuff that you mentioned. It was in COVID and the pandemic. We seem to have this new morality that is based on really nothing but like looking at a situation and thinking like, who is the oppressed and who is the oppressor? And, we go from there.
Right.
And the oppressed can do no wrong and the oppressor can do no right. And that's kind of the calculation you make. So when it comes to the trans issue and the issue of children, we look and we say, well, the trans people are super oppressed. And so they get to call the shots. We have to listen to everything they say. And what the, really radical trans activists are doing right now is saying, we have to let these trans kids transition, even though they can't really tell us what trans is and how a kid knows that. But so they're kind of holding society captive, being like, you have to listen to us. We're oppressed. You're oppressors. Anything you do to try and stop this is hateful. There's been so much rhetoric around how hateful this is. Our premier, if you looked at the front page of any mainstream newspaper after these policy changes were announced, you would think that she's just a monster. You would think that she hates these children, that she wants them to die. Really prolific, major progressive politicians literally came out and were just like, she's going to be responsible for dead children. Like the rhetoric has just been insane.
Right.
And so right. I'm really trying to push against that. I think that is very manipulative and very emotionally abusive, but they let themselves get away with it because they're coming from this, like, we're oppressed. You can't say anything to us. We're allowed to be so emotionally manipulative. Right. Yeah. So it all ties into this. And I think that's what we're seeing just out in the social fabric, like beyond this one issue. And I think that's another reason why I've run into some problems with my own kind of side, because there's a lot of people, a lot of feminists who kind of just want to tackle this gender issue. And I don't really think they see that it's part of this bigger problem. A lot of them do, of course. I think people are waking up to it, but they feel like if they could just extricate the trans issue, we're going to be great. Versus I'm like, well, no, it's really part of this wider web of things that are really going wrong.
Yeah, there is a lot of things going wrong with society today, and anything, and this is something that I continuously go back to, Eva, is anything that perpetuates this, us versus them mentality. Anything that prevents one side from wanting to speak up. Or being able to speak up is not doing any of us any favors. I mean, I don't care whether it's the group that's trying to speak or the people that are trying to avoid being spoken to. It does none of us any favors. It just not being able to have the conversation. I mean, at least we're still in an era where we're supposed to be protected in this country anyway. We're supposed to be protected in our own thoughts and the ability to speak our mind, without the government, coming after us. I know, in Canada in certain ways that's not such a viable liberty to count on. But, at least there's more people, and I think we're going to see more people, Eva, waking up to the idea that we can't just shut down the conversation and expect things to go well. I mean, I think if one thing is becoming abundantly clear, whether it be in the United States or Canada or parts of Europe and things like that, I think people are waking up to the idea that, we can't just shut down those who oppose what we're trying to say and expect it to go well. Because it does two things, really. I mean, well, it does a number of things, but the two that stand out most to me is, number one, it provides it really, what it does is it kind of exacerbates these conspiracy theories and opens up
Yes.
a bigger, I don't know, a bigger stage for all these just things that, well, like I said, conspiracy theories or just the wackiest of ideas, because what it does is it gives legs to the worst of ideas. It just, it makes people say, well, there it is. Obviously, they're trying to shut me down. So obviously what I'm saying is true. But then the other thing that really, the biggest thing that stands out for me is, well, I'll go back to what I was saying before. We are not able to course correct when things are going sideways. We're not able to course correct when things are going wrong if people are not having the conversation.
Exactly.
And I want to throw in a third one then too, because the other one that really bothers me the most, and this kind of goes to a lot of the things that I talked about with my friends from the Pro Human Foundation and a number of conversations I've had on this podcast, whether it be on this podcast or friends from Braver Angels or things like that, is when we don't allow ourselves to be subjected to other opinions and other points of view, it what it does is it increases the amount of ignorance that we have for other people in other, call it tribes or groups or whatever box or however you want to label those boxes. But as that ignorance grows, our fear of the other people grows. The less we know about somebody, the more they're going to stand out in our mind as somebody that we have to oppose. So if we are not having those conversations, especially conversations with people who have different mindsets than ours, we are naturally, as human beings, going to build up a greater us versus them mentality, a greater disdain for those people. And the vast majority of the time, it's so unjustified. It does not even make sense. I mean, the reality is if you get together, if you sit down with somebody who you may not agree with on most things, you are going to find that common humanity. You are going to find that you probably have a lot more in common with that person than you don't.
I think that's absolutely true. Like, I'm really happy to let the other side of the gender issue speak. I have no problem. I don't want to shut them up, because I know most people are kind of tacitly captured by this, and I know they're not terrible, horrible people. I know even the radical activists, as much as they really grate on me. Like, I mean, I recently, earlier this month, was face to face with some of these most radical activists, and it was actually a pretty interesting experience to see them in person versus just online, because I'm in Calgary, and I was invited to go up to Edmonton, the capital of this province, to take part in a roundtable discussion about the policies that were proposed.
Mm-hmm.
And the other side, there was four of us who were supportive of these policies. All of us same-sex attracted, because the roundtable was for the LGBT community. Opposite us, there was actually far more of them, 7 or 8 of them. But I don't care. There are more gay organizations that would be against this stuff simply because I think they're captured by this ideology. So it's to be expected. So no, I was very happy to have the opportunity to take part in that. It did give me, to be honest, like, some of them were just so radical and just so captured. It was really hard to kind of stand it, but not all of them. And all of them have the right to have their voices heard. I had no problem with that, but boy, did they hate that we were there. Like, they hated it. we were kind of getting into this discussion, and this one man, Christopher Wells, he kept motioning over to us, like, why are these nobodies here? Like, why are they here? Because he's some chair at some university, right? And he thinks he's got the right to speak. And like most of them, like I said, 4 or 5 of these people, sure, we totally disagree on this issue, but they were calm, they spoke, they weren't, yelling. It was with a minister from the government. They weren't yelling at her, but there was like 2 or 3 of them that, were crying, telling her this is going to, again, kill children. This one man, he just was basically shouting at her. And I really thought that was just so disrespectful. Like, I had to chime in, and I was like, I can't stand watching this. Like, we're supposed to be having a discussion, right? But again, I'm not upset that they were there. Like, it was actually pretty cool we have a conservative government at the moment to invite this other side to be heard. Sure, maybe it's not going to change the policies. It might, but they are being heard. But then this crew that was there, they get out after the roundtable meeting, they go downstairs to the media, and all they do is call for the minister and the premier to resign. And they say they're not being heard, they're not being listened to, right? And,
sure.
And so I had to actually come in and kind of tap one of the news anchors and be like, look, we were there too. We were on the other side. Would you like to speak to us? And actually, they did speak to me. But where this is going is it's actually quite funny, because just a few days ago, Justin Trudeau came to Alberta. And I think he did it quite sneakily. I don't even know if Danielle Smith knew he did it. And he came and he met with those people who were at the round table, but only the ones who were on the other side, only the ones who were against the policies. We were not invited, right? Okay. I don't know if I would have taken the invitation, even if I had it, but right. So it's funny, because the conservative side is actually trying to make them feel like, look, we do want to listen to you. We're not trying to shut you out. But then Trudeau comes to town, and it's just the one side, right? And he's tweeting about, I met with the LGBT community today. It's like, well, no, you met with a very small radical portion of them.
Right, a small radical subsect of them that agreed with you anyway.
Exactly. Like, part of the thing I tried to mostly express in the roundtable that I was at was like, look, these people are speaking for themselves, but I do not like that they seem to be speaking for me, because they kept speaking for the community. And I'm like, there are 4 of us here who are not of this opinion. Right. So that was important. And so, we need to hear each other. And I just feel like not to do a other side thing and be tribal, but they really aren't. And that's what makes it so easy for them to think that us on this side, the things I've heard about myself, this man has gone on podcast and said, we're self-hating. We have internalized homophobia. We have internalized transphobia. Like, he's saying that's the only reason we could possibly be on Danielle Smith's side, right? Instead of just actually hearing us out. Because I understand that his belief and his opinion, as much as I don't like him, I understand it's genuine, right? But he won't give us that. He won't extend that to us. And so that's where people get whipped up into this frenzy where they think that Danielle Smith wants to kill them.
Yeah.
And it's just so absurd, right? If they would stop for a second and think like, and it's such a terrible message to send to children as well. Like, when the media was interviewing me, I did expressed that. Of course, they didn't show that in any of the news clips, but I said, I think it's very irresponsible to be telling 2 children that their government hates them.
Yes. Yep.
Right. And I wish they had shown that, but of course not.
Yeah. Well, of course they're not, because it doesn't comport with their narrative. And the thing is, the beautiful thing about showing or allowing all people to speak, Eva, and one of the reasons I think, some of the more radical voices in some of these conversations don't want all voices to be heard, is because what it does is it shows them for what they are. It's really easy for the radicals to kind of float to the top when you're allowing all points of view to be heard. And this is something that I've talked about with other people as well, is, they're like, and I've even had very influential people say, well, how can we just allow, all of these people to be heard when some of these points of view are very dangerous and whatever. And I, the thing that I continue to go back to in situations like that and in scenarios like that is, if we allow all points of view to be heard, because very seldom is everything just black and white, right? I mean, it's not all one way or the other. Usually there's a spectrum of points of view. And if you allow that spectrum to be heard, usually you can start to narrow things down as to, what makes sense and what's a little crazy, right? You'll kind of say, well, yeah, that's pretty wacky over there. We can work our way through that, or kind of work them out of the conversation, because having the conversation doesn't mean you just allow everybody to ramble on for the whole time. And but by opening it up, especially initially, opening it up to all points of view, you can typically very quickly figure out on that spectrum who's on the extreme that side and who's on the extreme that side, and kind of work your way to a some kind of a consensus, or some kind of bridging platform as to what's going to be the best for most people. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're always going to have your outliers as to, I mean, whether it be the trans movement or whatever movement, whatever ideology, whatever thing that you want to think about, there's always going to be anecdotal situations, and not everybody is going to be accommodated 100%. Because that's not how we live as a society. We can't live, everybody deserves the respect as an individual and should be able to live as long as they're not infringing upon the rights and freedoms of other people. But we cannot make everything in society so that it fully accommodates the whims and wishes of everybody in society, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to live by this social compact, so we all, or so the vast majority of us live in a sane environment. And by shutting out, by doing what you were talking about there, Eva, where they try to make it sound like, or Trudeau tries to make it sound like, met with the LGBT community. It's not a monolith, just like we talked about, right? You can't just say, well, I met with the LGBT community and this is what they said, as if it was one person, or if it was one lockstep mindset. And in doing so, does a huge injustice to everybody else along that spectrum who might think differently.
Yeah, exactly. And the reason that I want the other side to speak isn't like entirely selfless and noble. It's because I think they're so radical that the more people that hear them, they're going to do exactly what you talked about. They're going to realize that very quickly that this is the radical opinion, and we're going to kind of have to adjust our view and to come to some kind of agreement, because a lot of the trans and the gender stuff has come in really under the radar, and most people don't realize how far it's gone. Most people don't realize that we're doing these things to children. Most people don't know what's happening in schools. They don't know what's happening in women's sports and women's prisons. So I want them to have a voice. I want these radical activists to have a voice, and so people can see. Right. And I think that that's what's just so important about these policies that have been put forward, because as I've commented in other places, maybe they're not my perfect policies in the world. Maybe if I wrote them, it would have been different. But that's not really the point. The point is that they've started this conversation that has been kept at such a at such an ignorant level that most people didn't know what was even going on. And so now we have to have this conversation. And sure, it started off really, really vitriolic and talking about hate, this and that. But I actually, maybe I'm an optimist, but look, these news organizations were willing to at least show a clip of me speaking. There was 3 of them that did that. There was another that ran my comments in a newspaper. And sure, out of a 2-minute clip, I was 5 seconds. But right now, yeah, a voice like mine seems like it's in the minority. I don't think it is, but I don't care. If people get exposed to that, then good. That's just a positive, right?
Right.
I think there's a lot of people who tend to think, well, it's not happening fast enough, and we're not aiming at the right goals because we want to have kind of incremental change, but we should do this. But they don't understand how it works. You have to talk to people. And I think the reason that I'm able to have these conversations and sit there and not explode at what I'm seeing is because I have an ideal view of maybe where things should go and how they should end up. But I'm under no illusion that my view is going to be the one that wins the day. Likely it's not going to, not in all of its details and specificities, right? So it doesn't hurt me to hear these other ideas, because of course I'm going to fight for what I want, but at the end of the day, there's probably going to be compromises.
Sure.
And a lot of the more radical people on my side, that's what they really don't like. They're like, of course I'm not going to compromise on the important things. Of course I'm going to keep pushing as much as I can to not transition children, to get rapists out of women's prisons. Of course I'm going to do that. But even just on things like, they've been after me about my personal choice of using pronouns for my friend, right? Like female pronouns. And I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to bring these radical politics into my personal life. You have to have that sphere. You have to keep that sacred. Otherwise, like we talked about earlier, it's just going to poison you, right? And these very toxic conversations that are happening at the political level, to bring that into your life and your friendships and your relationships is just, I think that's why I can keep going, because I really try not to do that. And so that's why I ended up pissing off all sides. But yeah, no, ever since doing the roundtable in person, I've really seen, like, this is how it's done. Like, you're going to come face to face with people that you just like don't agree with and that you probably don't like at all, but they are part of society.
They are part of society, and you have to have those conversations.
Yeah, I'm not going to just boot them out. I have to try and convince them otherwise. Right. I have to show the wider society that my way is better. That's the way you do it. You don't do it by shutting down the other side. You have to offer something different.
Right.
And I have a lot of faith that once that different path is offered, that a lot of people will take it, because I truly believe I have a sensible stance, and I'm not extreme, and I'm fighting for things that are good and right. And so I don't need to shut the other side down, because I think most people will see that once they actually see what I'm really saying.
Right.
Once they get past the veneer of like, well, she's just a hateful bigot and she hates trans people, right?
For sure. Well, and there's something that, and I know we're getting close to the end of our time here, Eva, but there's something that you said there that really I want to key on, and I want everybody who's listening to really understand this, because it goes to so many things that I talk about. It's certainly not exclusive to the LGBT or lesbian, gay, bisexual, same-sex attracted, trans movements, whatever. It can be applied to just about anything that people disagree on. But when people within a certain power structure will only talk to people with one point of view and then try to use that as evidence that there is a consensus, and use that as justification for moving forward with whatever they are going to press upon everybody else, we've got a big problem. I mean, this is something I've talked about with my friend Dr. Jay Bhattacharya when it comes to the government's response to the pandemic, or whether it be social policies and how we use or how people within certain power structures use identity-based and identity-sensitive issues to make policy and try to steer our society in a certain direction based on those identity-sensitive issues. It's all garbage. We cannot allow that to be the case. When people in certain power structures use one point of view from one particular whatever, and I don't care what it is, and try to use that and drown out every other voice, and do not allow alternative points of view, and then try to say that there's a consensus, we have a huge problem. And that should stand out to each and every person as a big problem, because typically there is not a consensus. And if voices are being suppressed, if other opinions are being suppressed, you can almost be sure that there is no consensus, and you need to dig in further. So, Eva Kurilova, so great to talk to you again. I look forward to so many more conversations with you. Tell the DTH listeners where they can find you, and obviously you've got the reality-based Women Unite 24 conference coming up in Toronto on March 8th. We'll try to get this out before then. But what else is going on, and where can the DTH listeners find Eva Kurilova?
All right. Well, first of all, thank you so much. This was so much fun, and I really look forward to doing it again sometime. So the main place you can find me is on X, formerly Twitter. It's just, my handle is Eva_Kurilova. You can also find me on my Substack, which is evakurilova.com. Most of my writing is there. If I write things in other places, I tend to post about it and link to it. I also do a lot of writing for a great Substack called The Distance. And yeah, that's me.
So cool, my friend. It's such a pleasure to see you, Eva. Thank you for having another conversation with me on the Derate the Hate podcast. You're fantastic. Keep it up, and we will talk again.
Thank you.
Friends, if there's anything in this episode that provided exceptional value to you, please make sure to hit that share button. Share it with your friends, share it far and wide. And of course, if you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe right from our website so you can get the Derate the Hate podcast sent to your email inbox every week. So this is Wilk wrapping up for the week saying get out there, be kind to one another, be grateful for everything that you've got, and remember it's up to you to make each and every day the day that you want it to be. If there is something that you would like to share with me, you can catch me on most social media platforms, or you can email me directly, wilk@wilksworld.com. With that, my friends, I am going to back on out of here, and we will catch you next week. Take care.